All right, this is, I'm going to do one video for Advanced Algebra 1 and for Algebra 2 because y'all are doing the same thing today. And you may be doing the same thing Thursday too. So I thought it would just save me time to do one video. So this is for 5th period, Advanced Algebra 1, and for all my junior Algebra 2 students. I do wish some seniors would watch this. They need to know this. Also, on my Facebook page and on this YouTube channel, I'm going to, after this video, post a couple of videos that I would be showing you if we were at school to help you learn this quadratic formula. Because, of course, you're at home, so you don't have to memorize it. But if you were at school, you would have to memorize it. And so I always show these little lame, but I like them, videos that help you remember the quadratic formula. So I would like for you to watch those. You'll probably get a kick out of them. Hey, Lori. I don't know how long you've been there. I was just telling how I like to have my students watch these YouTube videos on the quadratic formula, and I'm going to post those later after this lesson. It's just ways that I always helped my students memorize the quadratic formula. Of course, now they don't have to memorize it because they're at home, so they have it easy. But anyway, we're going to get started. Let's see if it's focused or if it's blurry. It looks like it's pretty clear. So our goal today, we've been working with quadratics, and we've been solving quadratic equations using the square roots by factoring. The last one was a hard one by completing the square. And then now today's our last method on solving quadratic equations, and that's by using the quadratic formula. And you know, some students are much better with a formula than any other way, so a lot of them like to just use this way every time. And it'll work. It's just a little bit more work involved to me, I think, than factoring. It's easier, though, than completing the square. So, first of all, remember, if you have standard form for a quadratic equation, it's always in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Hey, Travis. Travis, I did the 6th and 7th period Algebra 1 video earlier, so it's I have not got it on YouTube yet, but it's on the Facebook page. Okay, so just look for Algebra 1's video. It's really easy. So if your standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, this a, b, and c are all going to be numbers that you plug into this formula. All right, so the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that whole thing is over 2 times a. Now, I also have my students sing this at school in the tune of Farmer John or Frere Jacques. And so I'm going to sing that for you, and then I want y'all to sing at home. Oh, Lord, I know y'all aren't going to sing, and I can't sing worth a flip, but I'm going to do it anyway. If Kathleen was here, she would be humiliated. Okay, so, and I always make my students get louder and louder and louder so everybody can hear them all over the school. This is negative b, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac, over 2a, over 2a. Now, y'all sing along at home. Negative b, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac, over 2a, over 2a. All right, y'all have that down? So in this problem, on example 1, what you want to do first is identify a, b, and c. Remember, a is always in front of x squared. So I'm just going to come over here and write A equals 4. B is always the number in front of X. So B is going to equal 3. And then C is always this number at the end, the constant. And that is -4. Take the sign in front of it. Now, these numbers are all you have to look at to fill in this quadratic formula. You don't have to look at this problem anymore. But before we continue, I want to make sure you understand what we're doing is finding out what X equals in this equation so that this left side is computed to equal 0. And when you find those answers, that's going to be your x-intercepts in a parabola. All right, so this whole lesson is all about, or all of these lessons we've been doing, it's all about finding your x-intercepts on your parabola. Just don't ever lose sight of what it actually means. And I know most of the time students don't care what it means, but that's what it means. All those parabolas that we learned how to graph, what we're doing here is just figuring out how to find the x-intercepts where the parabola crosses the x-axis. All right, let's get into solving this problem. So we're going to start out with x equals -b, and b is 3, so that's going to be -3 plus or minus the square root. B squared is going to be 3 squared minus 4 times, I'm going to put parentheses for times, A is 4, then times C is -4. And then start back up here under the -3 because the whole thing is over 2A. So that's going to be 2 times 4. All right, now stop for a minute and look to see if you know where I got all these numbers. This is your A, so that's 2 times 4. This is your B, so that's -3 and then 3 squared. And then minus, this 4 right here, behind the minus is always there. And then it's times A times C. And now what we've got to do is work out what's in this square root. So that's going to be x equals -3 plus or minus the square root. Now I would advise you to use your calculator on all of this in here and put it in just like you see it. And let's see if I can get that to show up okay. Let me stand up. I'm too short to sit down and see what's on my camera. Okay, so this is what we're doing. 3 squared. Whoops, I gotta turn my calculator on. 3 squared minus 4, and then I'm just going to put a parentheses for times. The calculator knows that that's for times. Times 4, close your parentheses, and put another parentheses, times -4. So in the next parentheses, put -4, close your parentheses, hit equals, and that's the number that is under the square root symbol, 73. And then that is all over 8. So now what we're going to do is break this up into our two answers, once with a plus in front of the square root of 73 and one with a minus. So that's going to be x equals -3, let's just do plus this time, the square root of 70, whoops, I said 70 and I wrote 3, the square root of 73, and all of that is over 8. And then we're also going to do it with -3 minus the square root of 73 all over 8. Be careful when you put this in your calculator, because if you were to do, now y'all listen carefully, if you were to do -3 plus the square root of 73 divided by 8, it's only going to divide the 8 by what it's next to because of order of operations. So you want to do negative 3 plus the square root of 73, hit equals, and then divide by 8. And I'll do it on my calculator to show you. I'm going to do that answer right under this. So that is going to be negative 3 plus the square root of 73, hit equals, and then do divided by. And if you do divided by, right after you hit equals, it's going to say answer divided by, and then you put your 8 in. Okay, now the IXL lesson wants you to have it in decimal form, so I'm going to use my SD key. Now, if you don't have an SD key, look for an FD key, where it has an arrow in between the F and the D. And that's going to be 0.69 rounded to the nearest hundredth, which is what I believe IXL tells you to round it to. So that's going to be 0.69. And then we've got to do it again with negative 3 minus 73. So, hey Brittany. After I finish this, I'm going to go back over this example 1. Make sure you understand it, okay? So that's going to be negative 3. Oh, can y'all see that? Negative 3 minus the square root of 73. Hit equals. Don't forget to hit equals. And then divided by 8. Hit equals. Now remember, this has to be in decimal form. So I'm going to hit my SD key. You may have an FD key. And that's going to be negative 1.44 rounded to the nearest hundredth. Negative 1.44. And those are my 2 answers. Good grief, it just went blurry. Why does it do that with Algebra 2 and sometimes Advanced Algebra 1? There it is. It just cleared up. Maybe, I tell you, I think I have a magnetism in me. I'm electrically charged. Because when I sit back, it clears up. That's why all my watches always go dead. Alright, so I'm going to back up and explain this from a distance. So example 1, again, Brittany, since you're just joining, I'm going to go back over this example. What we're doing is solving equations, quadratic equations, by using this quadratic formula. If you'll go back and watch the beginning of this video, you'll get a treat because I sang this for you. I sang it, and I can't sing, worth a flip. But I used to make my students sing this out loud in the classroom to help them remember it. I'm not going to do it again, though. So right here, we have 4x squared plus 3x minus 4, and you want to identify A, B, and C, because if you look at the formula, it's all dealing with A, B, and C. And so A is the number in front of x squared, and so that's what I've done over here. I identified A, B, and C. A is 4, B is 3, C is negative 4. And once you have identified A, B, and C, you just plug into this quadratic formula. And that's what I've done here. Negative 3, because it's negative B, and B is 3, plus or minus the square root of B squared, which is 3 squared, minus 4 times negative 4, because it's 4AC. And A is 4, and C is negative 4. And then it's always over that whole thing, starting with your negative B, it's over 2 times A, so that's 2 times 4. And then the rest of this was just computation, working it out. We had to work out what was under the square root first, and we got 73. And then because it's got a plus or minus in front, we split this from here into 2 problems. Negative 3 plus the square root of 73 over 8, which is right here. And then negative 3 minus the square root of 73 over 8. And then you get these 2 answers on your calculator. Make sure when you put this in your calculator, let me write it down here what don't do. Do not do this. Don't do negative 3 plus the square root of 73 divided by 8. Now look at that for a minute. Y'all are smart. Y'all should know why you don't want to enter that in your calculator. When you enter that in your calculator, it is, because of order of operations, it's just dividing those 2. you want to divide all of this that's on top by 8. So you either have to put parentheses around all this that's on top before you do your division key, or you have to do what I suggested and do -3 plus 78, -3 plus the square root of 73, and then hit equals. And once you hit equals, then you can do divided by 8. All right. Did that make a little sense? We're not going to do a whole lot of examples with this because it's all the same thing. We're just going to do a couple until y'all get used to it. Then I'm going to give you your IXL lesson, and I'm not going to, because this takes, a little bit of time, I'm not going to give you a high SMART score. I think the SMART score is 60. But let's move on to example 2. And yeah, we've only got 3 examples. All right, example 2. We're going to solve 7r to the second minus 4r minus 9 equals 0. Hey, Gavin. Gavin, I already did the 6th and 7th period Algebra 1 video. It's on I haven't uploaded it to YouTube yet. It's still on the Facebook page, though. But you're welcome to watch this if you want. This is Advanced Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 combined. By the way, what we're doing here, we will do probably... No, we won't do it until probably Tuesday. Okay, so look at this quadratic equation, and what we want to do is identify, first of all, A, B, and C. So I'm going to write it down over here. A equals this number in front of r squared, which is 7. B equals the number in front of r, which is -4. Take that sign with it. -4. C equals this constant, -9. Make sure you take the sign with it, -9. And once you've identified A, B, and C, then you just plug it into your formula. The formula's on the other page if you have to refer back to it. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in right here. X equals -B. Okay, and well, I'm going to go ahead just to make it easier for you to write up here at the top. And I'll sing it again as I write it. -B, plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root, B minus 4AC, B squared minus 4AC over 2A, over 2A. So that's the formula. And now we are going to plug in our B into this B. So -B, it's going to make it a positive. It's already a negative right here. So this negative in front of B is going to be a negative, which makes it a +4. Plus or minus the square root. B squared is going to be -4 squared. And I put that in parentheses just to make sure you know that you're squaring the negative. You're squaring all of that. So that's -4 times -4, which is a +16. When you square your B, that number is always going to be positive. So I would, if the B is a negative, so you won't mess up on your sign, I would always put that in parentheses, that B in parentheses before you square it. Then -4 times A, which is going to be parentheses 7, then times C, which is going to be parentheses -9. And then all of that is over 2 times A, which is 2 parentheses 7, 2 times 7. Okay, so now we have X equals 4 plus or minus the square root, and I'm going to get my number from doing this computation under the square root. And I would get your calculator and just type it in exactly like it is here. The parentheses, the calculator recognizes, so I would type those in. So that's going to be -4, and I'm going to do parentheses -4 squared minus 4 parentheses 7, closure parentheses, and then parentheses -9, closure parentheses. You can see that that's exactly the way I have it written under the square root. Hit equals, and it gives you 268. So we're going to put 268 under that square root. And then that's all over the answer for 2 times 7, which is 14. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to the side as I'm about to run out of room underneath. And I'm going to take this and split it up into my two answers. 4 plus the square root of 268 over 14. And then 4 minus the square root of 268 over 14. So that's going to be x equals 4 plus the square root of 268 over 14. And then it's going to be x, I'm going to need to slide this over, I think. X equals 4 minus the square root of 268 over 14. And then I'm going to put my final two answers underneath each one of those. So remember, we're going to do 4 plus the square root of 268. 4 plus the square root of 268. Then I'm going to hit equals. You need to make sure you hit equals after that. And once you hit equals, do divided by that bottom number, which is 14. And then change it to decimal. And when you change it to decimal, if you don't have the SD key, look for an FD key. It looks just like this, except it's F to D instead of S to D. And that gives you 1.46 when you round it to the nearest hundredth. 1.455 is 1.46. And then we want to do the same thing, but this time make it minus the square root of 268. So that's going to be 4 minus the square root of 268, hit equals, then divided by the bottom number, which is 14, and then change it to decimal, and that's negative 0.88 when you round it to the nearest hundredth. So x equals negative 0.88, and that's your two answers. All right, I'm going to sit here for a second, see if you want to type in any question for me before we continue. We have one more example. I have gray paint on my hands, by the way, as I've been painting. Any questions, Brittany, or whoever else is there? This really, as long as you have the formula with you, it's not that hard. It's just a matter of making sure you compute everything right in the formula on your calculator and you round it right. So just take your time when you're doing these. And like I said, I'm not going to give you a high SMART score on this. All right, let's do this final example. You're blue and I'm gray. All right, solve 5p to the second minus 16p plus 3 equals 0. So let's identify A, B, and C. A equals 5. B equals negative 16. And C equals 3. So let's fill into our formula. I promise I won't send it again. That's going to be x equals negative b, and b is already negative, so that's going to be a positive 16, plus or minus the square root. B squared is going to be negative 16, and because that's negative, I'm going to put it in parentheses, squared. Don't forget to square it right here. Then minus, it's always minus, 4 times 5 times 3, because it's 4ac. Then all of that is over 2a, which is 2 times 5. Okay, and because I might run out of room, I'm just going to come over here to the side to simplify what's inside my square root then. That is going to equal 16 plus or minus the square root. Whatever I get in that square root is going to be over 2 times 5, which is 10. Now I'm going to use my calculator to get this answer from negative 16 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3. All right, 16. Oh no, it's negative 16. Don't forget that. So I'm going to put parentheses, negative 16, close the parentheses, square it, minus 4 parentheses 5 parentheses 3. Let me make sure that's right. 4 times 5 times 3, yeah. So then hit equals, and it gives you 196. Y'all know what 196 is? 196 is a perfect square. It's 14 times 14. So I'm going to split this up. And the reason I'm telling you that is once you do your 16 plus the square root of 196, you're not going to have a square root left anymore. So that's going to be 16 plus the square root of 196 over 10. And then we're going to do it again with 16 minus the square root of 196 over 10. All right, so that's going to be x equals, so let's compute that. 16 plus the square root of 196. Remember, at the end of the square root, hit equals. Don't get in a hurry and do divided by 10. After you hit equals, look, it's 30. And then you divide it by 10. And that is equal to 3. Look at that. I just made that problem up and it came out to be a really good answer. So x equals 3. That's one of your answers. And then now we want to do 16 minus the square root of 196 divided by 10. So 16 minus the square root of 196. Make sure you hit equals. Then divided by 10. And that is, you can either, I think they'll want you to put a decimal in. So I'm going to go ahead and change 1/5 to a decimal, and it's 0.2. So x equals 0.2 or x equals 3. Those are your two answers. Oh Lord, it's blurry. When did it go blurry? Let me back up and see if it gets clear. Can somebody tell me if it went blurry a long time ago? Hey, Black Harkins. I did your oh, it got clear again. I did your video. I'm telling you, when I get close to it, it blurs. Blake, I did your video earlier. So look on the Facebook page for 6th and 7th period Algebra 1 for today. Alright, so because it went blurry about 2 minutes ago, I guess that's during that whole example. Let me go back over it then. Here's your 5p squared minus 16p plus 3. That's A, B, and C. We've got those here. Here's your A, B, and C. 5, negative 16, and 3. And so then you're going to plug those numbers into your quadratic formula, and this is what you get when you plug it in. That's 16 plus the square root of negative 16 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3. Then all of that is over 2 times 5. Once you compute all of this under the square root, you get 16 plus or minus the square root of 196. And then I split it up into my two answers, 16 plus the square root of 196 and 16 minus the square root of 196. I did that here, and then you put your divided by 10 on bottom. And so when you work these out, because the square root of 196 is 14, it's a perfect square, you're going to get some, good answers that you don't have to worry about rounding. You get the whole number 3, and then you get 0.2. All right, your assignment. Now, for my Advanced Algebra 1 class, make sure you're going to, on this IXL, you're going to do Algebra 2, all right? So make sure that you're on Algebra 2 on IXL and do J11. I'm going to say that one more time. Make sure you're on Algebra 2 on your IXL and do J11. All right. My IXL wasn't in the view, so I'm scooting it over so you can see your assignment. IXL, Algebra 2, J11. Bye, Brittany. Hope everybody watches this. See y'all later.